Welcome back to News Talk 13 before the hour. We want to spend our remaining moments talking about the dangerous and unsettled situation in Syria, where recent moves by the Russian military, moves this week, have complicated efforts to beat back ISIS. Reporter J.J. Green covers security and defense for WTOP, joins us now. Welcome back. J.J., take us right into it. We've got the American military pounding ISIS. Now we have Russia. We have the very public diplomatic piece as the president and President Putin talk at the UN. Take us through this. What's going on?
Well, the U.S. has been there for a while with the coalition. The Russians have said from the very beginning that they would support Syrian President Assad, and they believe that this is the best way that they can support him at this point. What they've done is they've gone in on a very consistent and aggressive basis in the last couple of days and bombed airstrikes, essentially taken airstrikes against targets inside of Syria. The question is, were these targets ISIL? They said that they were going to go after ISIL targets previously, and the U.S. military has reminded us constantly, and Russia, that that's what they said. But it appears as though some of the targets that they've gone after have not been ISIL, and that speaks to a comment that the Russian leadership made, essentially saying they were going after the enemies of Bashar al-Assad.
I listen to you on the radio every chance I get, and I heard you say the other day that until we have confirmation about who the targets are, it's careful that we not get ahead of ourselves in terms of being able to say what this Russian move is.
Well, Arizona Senator John McCain said yesterday that he is in contact with this group of U.S. trained fighters in Syria, and they've confirmed to him that they were targeted by Russian airstrikes, and they are not at all connected to the Islamic State. So that's one piece of potential evidence there, but there have been a number of places we've heard this same narrative coming from the White House and coming as well from the military, that the targets that Russia had engaged were not in the areas where ISIL's known establishments are. Now, the Russians came out today, and they've been putting out fairly consistently information suggesting and sort of deconstructing what they've done, saying these are the targets we've hit, these targets were ISIL targets, and we indeed have been attacking ISIL targets. But again, it's not clear if they're not attacking others as well.
The leadership of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is one of the tension points between the U.S. and Moscow. Is it possible, though, that if the Russian military is going after ISIS in a significant way, maybe not in cooperation with the U.S. coalition, but alongside, let's say, is it possible that some good can come from this?
I'm not sure what that good would be and in whose playbook it would be good. Look, I wrote a piece earlier this week after some fairly in-depth reporting with some intelligence people, some folks who are Syria-Russia watchers, and it basically takes a look at what at least some in the intelligence community think is a scenario that may be developing, a survival scenario for Bashar al-Assad, which is, if he's forced to leave Damascus, where would he go? Most likely to the Alawi Mountains. The Russians supposedly are trying to preserve their ability to engage or at least have access to a warm water port. That port is the port of Tartus. Where is it located? Just so happens to be in the Alawi Mountains, which is where, again, that's Bashar al-Assad's hometown. So that would be good, for them. But what would that do for the fight against ISIL? What would that do with respect to the hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed by the Assad regime in Syria? So, it depends on which camp you're looking at.
Have you seen any credible assessments of what impact the pounding on ISIL targets has had?
No, the Russians have said that they're going to deliver some kind of results once they've been able to go through and assess what they call the reconnaissance after these strikes. But one of the things that's important to note right now is Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter said recently that Russia's been using what he calls dumb bombs. Those are bombs that are not smart, not precision-guided munitions, which if that's the case, then there could be a lot of collateral damage. Even using precision-guided munitions, it's important to note as well that if you hit a target your target, precise target, but if it's in a very crowded and very congested urban environment, there still could be a lot of casualties, collateral damage. So it's not clear if the Russians know what's taken place or who the targets have been, whether they've gotten them specifically, or if they're trying to hang on to some of this information because they recognize there may be significant collateral damage involved.
We have a minute left. It's impossible to overstate the human impact of all of this. Europe is facing its most challenging refugee crisis since World War II, and many of the people who are fleeing in total desperation are Syrian.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, look at it. It's a couple 100,000 people have been killed over the last few years since 2012. And we're talking as well millions of refugees. I mean, Turkey is literally home to something like 2 or 3 million refugees, most of which have come from Syria. Syrian refugees have spread out throughout Europe. There are many in Jordan. Jordan is struggling with it. The U.S. is going to take a lot, but nowhere near what Europe is taking. So Syria has essentially, it's crumbled at this point. I mean, a lot of the history, a lot of the cultural, cultural sites in Syria are gone. So Syria is a mess at this point, and the world is still trying to figure out how to stop this carnage and figure out how to save Syria.
A dangerous situation, an amazing situation. I'm glad we were able to touch base with you on this.
Thanks, I appreciate your knowledge on this.
Well, thanks very much for coming in and helping us sort all this out. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
J.J. Green covers national security and defense issues for WTOP. Back after this.